Hey guys, welcome to Foresight TV. As many of you know, we have an amazing conference that starts next week called Evolve 2021, where we're going to reimagine together what life enrichment can be. We've been working on this like crazy. I want to give credit to Lola and Rebecca and Matt on my team, and of course Sara and Kelly, who are my guests today. And so we are really going to dive into, I was going to say we're doing deep dive, but we can't do a deep dive in 30 minutes on life enrichment. But we're going to just talk about what is possible, what we're going to be talking about. But first, I've got to run our intro. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. So the first thing I want to say, I'm going to have you guys introduce yourself, but the first thing I want to say before I have you do this, just so I don't forget, is that the ticket prices go up today for Evolve. At the end of the day, when we are done with the show, we're going to drop a link to purchase tickets in, but and while we would rather have more of your money than less of your money, we figure you'd rather save money, and so you should buy your tickets today and not wait until tomorrow or Sunday or Monday or Tuesday. So Sara, Kelly, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do and what your passion is?
Sure, great. Thanks for having us. Sara Kyle, and founder and principal at LA3 Solutions. LA3 Solutions is really just a strategic consulting and advising firm for everything in the way of engagement, life enrichment, well-being, kind of however you want to quantify that. Spent the last 13 years in the industry of senior living at multiple providers, various levels of care, kind of that whole continuum, and kind of took all of those things and learnings and started LA3 Solutions.
Cool. Kelly?
Thank you, Steve. Yep, I'm Kelly Stranburg and also principal at LA3 Solutions. And Sara and I are honored and humbled to be here today and share with you all what we love the most in senior living. Combined, we bring 25 years of experience, which doesn't seem possible sometimes, but have worked in every sort of capacity in life enrichment, worked at the community level, have worked in support roles, worked in a corporate strategic role. So kind of been in every sort of capacity you could imagine when it comes to programming, and just excited to share with you all.
So let's talk a little bit about where life enrichment is today. Life enrichment leaders are sort of part of the leadership team in most communities, but oftentimes they're not. One of the life enrichment Facebook groups a few months ago, they spent some time talking about pay ranges for life enrichment people, and they ran from, I don't know, $12 an hour up to, in some cases, in the $50,000 a year range. So just sort of reflect on where we're at, and then we're going to move to what it could be and what your dreams are for it.
Absolutely. I'll start, and then Sara can jump in. I think we're at a wonderful crossroads for the life enrichment or activity professional. It has always been a critical piece of the business, and there's a lot of value that these professionals bring to the table for our residents and how they can impact daily experience, overall quality of life, making sure they're connecting with others, making sure people aren't self-isolating. But often that role, because it's so forward facing with the resident, often gets immersed in a lot of other functions in the community. And so sometimes their core focus or core responsibility sometimes gets kind of reduced in priority. And so I think this past year has shown us just how valuable and how needed these professionals are to really create that daily experience that the marketing teams are going out and selling as the value add for communal living and senior living. And so I think this is a time to really reflect on how can we make sure moving forward that our enrichment or engagement programming is really the core and the daily focus of what is available for our residents to live the best version of their life day in and day out. Sara, what do you want to add?
It's interesting. So my first role was with predominantly skilled nursing and assisted living, 108 communities. And that was the first thing we started tackling is who is the person we're putting in this role? What, pay range is one thing, but then who is the person? I've since looked at, from either a consulting side or being in other organizations, we talk about it a lot, right? But it never goes past the part of conversation to action. And so I think for the last 10 to 12 years, we've been talking about who is the person that should be in this role? What is the skill set they should have? What is the pay range? Should it be a degree position? Do we need a degree position for this? What's that right skill set? And so I think, in order to almost litmus test an organization and figure out where they're at, what movement have they made in quantifying those standards? And it doesn't have to be a numerical standard, but have we, not just a job description, we rewrite them all the time, but do we change the qualifications and do we change that budget and the way that we try to source it? I think we're still at a spot that this role is absolutely crucial and we know it's crucial, but we feel it in a reactionary approach. Mm-hmm. And because it's a reactionary approach, we kind of pull the best person that we have at our disposal, which sometimes is this person is great with the residents. They're a creative spirit. They are warm and bubbly. Those things do not necessarily translate into the right skill set to multitask, prioritize, budget, plan, strategize, and what do you want this annual approach to look like? And I think that's still the miss, where we haven't put action behind the words we talk about in the boardroom.
So I'm gonna see. Let's play a little game of make believe for a minute. So I want you to imagine that on Monday morning, after Evolve is over, because you won't be able to do this during the conference, but after Monday morning, after Evolve is over, you go out to your mailbox and you find that there's a letter there, and you open it up and you find out that you've just inherited $100 million. And there's only one caveat, and that's that you've got to invest that money in senior living. But then you get to design the whole operating program, because now you've got enough money, so you're not worried about it, but you still have to make a profit. What would that operating program look like, and where would life enrichment fall in that? They didn't know I was going to throw this at them, so this is like totally unrehearsed. If you look like they're going, So
you know what, Steve? It's funny you say that, because 4 or 5 years ago, I had this conversation with the CEO of a community I worked at. I was like, if I win the lottery, could I donate money and make programming the way I wanted it? And she was like, of course you could. and I probably the first thing I would have done is elevated the wages for my staff. Now, I know that's not always the solution for this, but where I was, the things that were attracting our residents the most and having the greatest impact were things that didn't exist 5-6 years ago. I came in and I said, hey, we have a huge miss here, a huge gap in programming. And it was really things around physical well-being, and I will call it mindfulness and emotional well-being. And we really made a huge push to have more opportunities in those areas, because it was really, we kind of had like a Sleepy Hollow community going on. And I was brought on board to really create one that was very vibrant and started to break the norms of what people thought a retirement community was. And we had to get people moving and active and willing to address the hard things going on in their day-to-day life. And so, I think about my own experience in that seat, and that is probably where I personally would want to invest a lot of money in a different way, making sure we have the best tools and resources to provide those, not just staff, but then what are the tools to help support the staff, deliver that in the best way. And then to Sarah's point, how do you quantify progress and success, and what does that look like for the individual, but then also for the community as a whole?
Okay.
Sarah, what would you do?
I would go kind of a few levels up. The department silos, I think, are what inhibit growth in senior living. And I think it is what is so frustrating to staff, is that we're pretty regimented, and this is your lane and you stay in it. And if your lane doesn't make the most impact, then your lane doesn't look as powerful. So I say that because within each of those lanes, we have various tools and resources. Those resources do not talk to each other. So our view, our knowledge of the resident, who is our customer from prospect through end of stay, is siloed out within staff. And I think that impedes so much of this customer knowledge that is pivotal in trying to turn to be a different model that is senior living. So I would take away, we have this POS dining system, we have this maintenance system that we use, we have this clinical EMR, we have this sales CRM, we have this resident engagement platform, and I would make it one. And all the information's in one spot. If you want to know information about Betty Sue, you go and you look up Betty Sue and you see everything about her, right? To me, that would be my dream. And until we get there, I think there's a lot of redundancy and a lot of additional work that goes onto staff members that we in a corporate setting may not really understand.
Yeah. So I was trying to figure out exactly how I want to approach this. So I have a number of readers at Senior Living Foresight who are residents in various senior living communities. And I hear them expressing quite a bit of frustration with the current life enrichment programs. And in fact, the things they seem to be most attracted to are the things that they do when the life enrichment people have gone home and they can do their own programming. And somehow, on the one hand, I like the idea that they're doing their own programming, because that's sort of how real life is for the three of us day to day. We're responsible for our own programming. On the other hand, it seems wrong. Thoughts on that?
I'll go first. This has always kind of driven me crazy, Steve, is that, and we follow in these Facebook activity groups, this idea that programming or life enrichment is from 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, or 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. And it makes my head want to explode sometimes, because I'm like, what about the evenings? What about the weekends? And frankly, when as an operator, when you're looking at this piece of the puzzle, when we get back to some normalcy of organic visits and in-person sales visits, when do most people come and do those things? Evenings, weekends. And the number of times I've heard over the years of a loved one going to visit someone in a community setting, and they're like, there's nothing going on. I'm like, they came on a Saturday afternoon. Why is there nothing going on? Like that, it kind of burns me in a way. And so I'm like, that's one of the things that Sara and I have spent some time talking about, is how can this look different moving forward? How can we take existing budgets? We're not saying you got to add staff and do all that, but can you start to look at how you staff differently to provide peak hours of engagement? So yeah, I think our existing consumer and our future consumer, having things in the evenings, I think is critical. When you think about our own life and we get out of that quote unquote 9 to 5 job, when do we socialize? After work? When do we maybe go see a film or attend a concert? In the evening hours or on the weekend. So why, when we suddenly move into senior living, are we like, okay, now you have to conform to when we want to come to work? And so I have a problem with that. And I really think moving forward, this is a great time to look at, here's our staffing budget, and how can we start to look at this very differently to provide for our residents in a very different, engaging way.
Yep.
I think we've been ruled and fixated on this calendar, the 30-day approach, the Monday through Friday, and then you have the weekends. And we haven't been able to find a different solution other than that. So we are bound, I think, by a constraint that is pretty black and white. And to Kelly's point, it hinges entirely upon staffing structure. I think the one thing that is missing is we talk about, we ask for resident feedback and we ask what they want to do, and we're continuously seeking out new ideas. I've thought this for quite some time, that until the senior living community decides that it cannot be a little bit of everything to everyone, that everything gets watered down if you try to be everything to everyone in a tiny part, you're really nothing to everyone. You become nothing, right? I mean, I think you just become a watered down version of whatever you could be. And so until we start to capture resident interest in some type of a repository that is not head and it's not paper, but it is updated, and it's at a resident's time and interest that they want to update whatever it is that they're passionate about. And we take the top 5 and we're able to say that, just because we have 60 properties doesn't mean we do 60 things the same way.
Right.
But how can that community take what is in that resident interest space and run forward with it and dictate their programming based upon the autonomy of that community? It's hard to standardize. And I think that is our fear, is that we can't standardize it. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not standardizing much as it is. If you ask for people, what are these solid metrics that show success from community to community, they're minimal, right? So I think we're hanging on to this idea that we have something really good and we're too risk averse to move forward. My idea would be, put guardrails in place. Kelly and I talk about this all the time. There's guardrails, and those guardrails say that, we're going to program for mobility, cognition, socialization, whatever those could be. But within those guardrails, it may look completely different in a community setting. I would venture to say where there's time differences. I mean, I think about the Midwest and East Coast. It gets dark at 4 to 5 o'clock, right? On the West Coast, you're still happening. And so those staffing standards have to change, I think, with some simple things as geographical location.
Right.
The other thing that I think a lot about, so we have this great C-suite panel, what we're going to do, and we did a planning meeting with the speakers earlier this week. And one of the things I heard from all 3 leaders, and I get the privilege of actually moderating that panel, but one of the things I heard is this really significant sort of shift in how they're thinking about it. In sometimes I get my fingers messed up when I'm doing this on video. I don't know why that is, but two specific ways. And of course, I got this narrow screen. The first is that in all 3 of these organizations, their life enrichment lives solidly in the marketing department, because they believe that what that life enrichment, that programming, that congregate living, if you describe it broadly, is the thing that they're selling. And the second thing is they're moving much more to this idea that what they're doing is they're doing these things. The team is doing it with the residents rather than for the residents. And so I just sort of love to have your thoughts on that. Sara?
Yeah. So one thing that I think is an opportunity in this space, I love that idea. I will tell you, within 3 organizations, I struggled to find who I should report to, whether that was clinical, was it operations, and we hear this. It's not just one operator. We hear this weekly. Kelly and I do. Who should report to? Who should oversee this role? If the marketing I believe that the 2 most important people in a community in terms of occupancy, driving occupancy, are engagement and marketing, right? Clinical care, that has to be, the clinical has to be there. And then you have to have the operations that just make the day-to-day function. So when the narrative that marketing is telling is represented in real life by what is happening in engagement, there is a partnership that is codependent that just fits really well. Yeah. What we sometimes often see is marketing wants to sell this really great story, right? But when people come in, that story is not illustrated. And so it's a miss. And so there's a pointing of fingers, and it's a more, I think, contentious relationship. So that is definitely one. If those 2 can understand, those 2 departments, how integral their work is to each other, and it's not, I do before residents come in the community and then you do once they're in the community, I think that's huge opportunity.
Yeah. Kelly?
I mean, I would agree with Sara, and I think the most success that I've personally had over the years is when I reported directly to a CEO, because I had to partner with marketing. We were on an even playing field. And 2, it also elevated the priority of programming and engagement across the organization when our roles have had that true seat at the table, if you will, that we were given that voice and we were just as valued as marketing and operations and clinical care. And I think that's sometimes where there's a miss, is not only who do they report to, but how does an organization value this? Yeah. And so Steve, it's exciting to hear about the C-suite and where they are valuing the enrichment professionals and where it is in their org chart. It does make a difference. And even this past week, Sara and I were researching some organizational charts in senior living, and to find where that activity professional was located, it was sad to see how often it was down the line. And it's like, here's people who are having the greatest amount of impact day to day for the residents, along with clinical, and they're way down on the chart. And so I think being willing to examine that and analyze how can we differently approach this and where can we elevate them so that it matches what marketing is going out and selling, what our website is saying we are delivering day to day. It has to match, because when Sara said, like she said, often it doesn't. And then it's like, hey, what's going on here?
So very interesting. We did a webinar yesterday with one of our partners, Dreamscape, and it was about how to generate more leads, doing digital marketing. And they talked about working with some communities where they took photos from the dining service of just, plates of food and people eating together. And it increased the number of leads they got by this is just a crazy number, 270%.
Wow.
Pictures of food. And so I find myself thinking that, we're not really selling restaurants. We're really selling, even in assisted living and memory care, we're really selling a form of lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that if we could get those lifestyle pictures right, that would be even more powerful than pictures of food.
Oh my gosh, yes. I think social media is a little bit wonky still in our world. I think there's some fear at times to put our residents out there. And of course, you can ask them if they'll be willing to be in photographs and have them sign the release. I think there is a lot around utilizing our residents as part of that, selling process in a way, if you will. But the organizations that do it, they get amazing traction online. years ago, I wrote a column and I put my own residents' pictures in that column to go with that column. Nobody cared what I wrote about. The reaction to the pictures of just daily life, couple worse stage, but they were still our own residents. I had more reaction to that than anything else in these articles. And I think the communities and the companies that also use their own residents on their websites, there's a level of trust that occurs because you're not using models and you're using the people who chose to pursue you and choose you. And there's a lot to be said for that. It's just figuring out the legality around it, making sure you protect people and things like that.
You know, Kelly, that makes me think, and I've always thought, we've discussed this lack of the authenticity of, you know, showing residents who actually reside in senior living, right? Like, and how many of we have these, how do you take pictures? Make sure this lighting is good, make sure they're looking up, make sure they're not in a frail position if you're going to put them in a wheelchair. And as I'm sitting here thinking, I started thinking, if I was working for an organization and here's all the workers and they did a huge press release about how great we are, but they didn't put anyone who worked at the actual organization as an employee, that would make me feel pretty crummy.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't know what we're fearful of. I don't know until we get to the point that we sell a product that is about aging, and there's some beautiful, beautiful parts of aging, but we all know there's parts of aging that are inevitable. It's how we tell the story. You can't hide. I mean, it's the tours. You can't hide wheelchairs and walkers. People are smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
And so I just wish we would be authentic about what we offer, and that it's not about the ability or the functional level. It transcends so much beyond that.
Right.
And the person we're hiding because we think they may not look great is as important as anyone else. And I think when we try to hide and mask behind what we're selling, that's a demise of our own that we're doing.
So I'm going to touch on something that is probably sensitive, and it's hard for me because I don't feel like I've got exactly the right answer. But I pretty frequently, several times a month, I'll see a post of residents in the senior living community who are doing something just incredibly cute. And as somebody who is now in my 60s, who's got, I'm still working, I'll do that for another 10 years or something, but I might be in another 15 years a pretty good candidate for a senior living community. I don't know that I want to live my last years out after having a very successful career in life being somebody's example of cute. And I worry that, if I'm making paper mache, I don't know. I want to be careful because I know some people really get something out of it, but I think this is a big struggle. And so I'm just sort of curious what your thoughts are about that.
Sara, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Kelly and I, we've taken some slack for this. I think we have to be extremely careful because it comes from the best of intentions. Absolutely. It comes from what people have been trained at. I think it begins in the way that we speak to residents. This cuteness, I think, is a byproduct of how we're first taught, or how when you go into a community and you take someone who's never worked in memory care, they've never worked in senior living, and you put them in a dementia care unit, they don't know how else to respond to people with cognitive impairment other than childlike. And that is a learned behavior that you see over and over again. Yeah. And it's meant well, honey and dear and babe and sweetie, right? Because it's what's been an example to follow. It's that lack of training. And I think that is where all of this childlike behavior starts. I think that's where we get, if people want to do woodworking and do that, but we're scared for them, so we're going to give them the little type toys. And people want to use crayons, but they can't hold them well, so we're going to give them the child crayons. Like, all of these things feed down, and it's just become the norm. And it's because they're learning from each other, right? And it's meant, and that's the hardest part, is it's meant with this intention. And so you can't just go and correct, but you have to expose why this isn't okay. And I think, some of the residents that you have and that have been able to tell it from their point of view, right? The resident has to tell why it doesn't feel right and speak up and feel comfortable enough to say, please don't call me that. But there are ways that an organization can go about, the fact that Oriental Trading and S&S Product and the dollar store are our top 3 vendors in life enrichment. That's where the problem starts, is that we haven't said
That's a great point.
Where you can spend your money, right? You see it in procurement, you see it in dining, you see it in maintenance. This is where you buy your resources. These are our preferred vendors, right? We haven't taken the time to say, you know what? We're not going to buy childlike Oriental Trading stuff because we just haven't taken the time to do it. And that's where it has to start. But it has to not just say, here's a new mandate, you can't order from Oriental Trading, right? You can't go to dollar store anymore. It's a 2-year education process to get there.
Yeah. Right. It's so funny you say that because this is my last, I think actually I've got one more call with you guys for Evolve today, but when I'm done, I'm heading off to the dollar store or Hobby Lobby because I teach a bunch of 5th and 6th graders at my church every week. And so I've got to get stuff for them. And I'm not sure that the stuff my 5th and 6th graders are using should be the same stuff for people who are in their last chapters of their lives. That's an amazing point. I hadn't thought about that like that before.
I'll say one thing. Think about what residents bring in when they move in. If you went and looked in their junk drawer or their craft box or whatever it is that they bring in, those are not the supplies they're bringing in, especially the people that craft. And I think if we just ask them, what did you do? Right? So there's so much opportunity there. And I think that is such a low-hanging fruit that tells a completely different story.
Yeah. So guys, we are out of time. I wish we could keep talking about this. It's such an important thing. I want to just sort of share with you my dream. My dream is that life enrichment will become this thing where when I'm 99 years old and my kids put me in senior living, or we make a joint, put me in is a terrible. But when I move into senior living, when I'm 99 years old, and 6 months later, my kids want to come visit me, and I go, I don't really have time to see you today because I got this brand new life I'm living. And they're not mad about that. They go back and they say, oh man, you guys got to put your parents in this place where my dad is, because it's like he's got a brand new lease on life. And when that happens, that community, those communities that will do that will have a waiting line. They'd have a waiting line even in the middle of a pandemic. And I know that's your dream as well. So to you who are in the audience, if that's your dream, and you want to have the tools to do that, you should be attending Evolve 2021. It starts this coming Tuesday, April 6th. Is that right?
Correct.
And we go 3 hours a day, 3 days a week, over 2 weeks. Amazing speakers. There will be concrete things you can do to transform your buildings. I believe that the community, we've got a number of companies where every life enrichment director in the company is being a part of it. And I think that a year from now, we'll be able to go back and look at those companies of the people who've attended this event, and they will have higher occupancy, happier residents, happier team members. So thank you for changing the world. Thank you for being on today. And we will drop a link in so you can go purchase your tickets before they go up. And you know what? Even if you miss it and you're watching this over the weekend or next week and the ticket price has already gone up, you should still do it. It will pay for itself. Any last words?
Just thank you for this opportunity. And Sara and I aren't ever going to stop trying to change how this is viewed in our industry and how we can always improve and raise the bar, because there's always going to be that opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.